Alright, I apologize for not uploading for the last little while. I was doing uh, other things with programming and music for other projects, but I'm here now. Hooray. Alright, so right now I am going to be doing bindable events. Um, Essentially, bindable events, let me pull up Paint. Let me actually do that little diagram. So, normally with remote event, right? So we're just gonna, let me set this up, server, and then we have the client, right? Well, what a bindable event does is, this is a remote event. It communicates from client to server. Bindable events, on the other hand, can only communicate from client to client or server to server. They cannot go both ways. So in this case, bindable events cannot do this. This would have to be client, right? Oh man, client. This would have to be client for this to work because, as I said, you can't do that using bindable events. You can't go from client to server. You can only go client to client or server to server. That's essentially what a bindable event is. Now, let me just show you how. Normally, you would use them for transferring data on from server to another server script. Like, for instance, let's say I had two scripts here. We're going to name this one sender, or sender and getter. And we're just going to get the bindable event, right? So we know parents, we know how that works. We just go game event equals game server storage server script service dot event, right? And then we'll do the same thing in the getter script right here. Now, I'm just going to do event fire. And we're going to do this works exactly like a bindable event. I mean, this works exactly like a remote event too. You send arguments the same way, but it cannot go from client to server or server to client. It can only go one way. So I'm just going to do hello, right? So then we can do, this is the wrong script. I'm doing that in the getter. And then we're going to do event on event, meaning event.event. This means when it's like fired or when it's remote, when it's called upon, like when it's fired. Like when we do on server event, well in this case we just do dot on event, like dot event. That's basically what it means. We're gonna connect it to a function, we're gonna do the message. Right, and we're gonna print message. So now if we run the game, we notice nothing happens. Am I doing it wrong? Yeah, there we go. Sorry, the game didn't load up in time. So we see it says hello. It prints the message out. Hello. I can change this to cat. Let me change it to cat. 1, 2. We have cat. So that's essentially what a bindable event does. Now, what can I do with this? In real life scenario, what can I do with this? Well, I'm actually going to show you what you can do with it right now. I'm going to do a simple script that whenever the player joins, I want it to uh, add a player money, right? So I'm just going to do, this is going to be the receiver. So then we're going to get local player game.player. So we're going to do players.player added function, right? And we're going to connect to a function, right? We always have to connect to a function. And we're going to get the player as the parameter that's returned. So then we could do local, I'm going to set up a little stats table right here. Local money equal, or local stats equals this, right? I'm just going to do money. And then we're going to do local stats folder, right? This is the folder where the stats are going to be stored. We're just going to do instance.new folder. And we're going to do that in the player. Stats folder.name is going to be stats. Now bear in mind, this does not affect this at all. This is a variable name. This is a string value. They are not the same thing. So now we have a stats folder. Actually, I'm going to name this leader stats so we can see what's going on. Right. So now we have leader stats, and I'm going to do a for loop values in pairs or in pairs. Pairs is better for this because pairs does not pull out strings. It only gets non-string values like numeric numbers. Pairs, on the other hand, it gets strings, but it does not order them. So there's since I'm dealing with the table with just strings, I'm going to use pairs because it's safer. So now we have index values in this table we just created right here, right? Then I'm just going to do local clone equals instance.new int value. We're going to do it inside of stats folder. We're going to do the clone.name is going to be equal to the value, right? The values we just get. So this will be money. That'll set the name to money. Now if we play the game, let's see what happens. Yep, we have money right here. Right? I could also add this like this. I can do kills, right? That'll also work like that. If we just look, we have kills. We just changed one line, right? That's a shorter way to write leader stats if you guys were interested. Anyway, so now we have that. Now, what if I want to change the money, right? Well, what I could do is, I could do this. I could do event.event, right? Connect it to a function. We're going to do stat name. So we're going to do player, right? Dot stats, stat name, dot value equals the same thing plus 5 whenever whenever the event's called. And then I'm going to call the event fire, and we're going to do money because, right, you know, we got to do money. Players game.players.player added connect function. I'm just going to do this so whenever the player character joins, I'm just going to do a player character added function. Bear with me here. Right? So, don't worry, I'll explain what this does if you don't know what I'm doing. Player.character connect function, right? We get the character, and then we're just going to fire whenever the character's added. So now, let me run this, and then I'll explain what it does, right? Yeah, see, look, stats not a valid member folder. There we go. Now let me explain what this does. So we're getting in this getter here, we created leader stats, right? We created money and kills. These are the two values that we're going to get, right? So we created them with this for loop, a simple way, you know. And then the event, what does the bindable event do? Well, whenever the player is added, right? And whenever a character is added, we can either assume the character just joined or the character died, right? That's when character added, because every time a player respawns, it needs to make a new character. That's what that does. Or whenever player, let's say the first time the player joins, it does that too. Now, this right here, event fire money. Then whenever the character is added, it will fire the bindable event with the parameter money. Now, if we look at the event, what it does when it receives the fire, when the event is called, like when the event is fired, using this right here, fire event fire. This will basically call upon this function right here because we're getting the event and we're getting when it is fired. We're going to connect it to a function, and we are going to get this parameter right here, money, right? That's the stat name. Then we're going to go to this folder up here we created up here, right? And we're going to notice, okay, well, we're firing this thing. What is stat name? Well, in this case, stat name is money, right? And money exists as one of the stats, right? Because we created it in this loop right here, right? So it's an int value and the name is money. So it's going to say, okay, well, when we fire the event, it wants to get that value and add 5 to the value, right? That's what it'll do, right? So we could also do this with kills. Watch. I can do kills. Let's say I wanted to do that with kills. And we notice it does 5 kills. It'll add every time I add a character. Every time I reset or whatever, it'll add 5 kills. What if I wanted to add a new one? Well, you could just go up to this little table up here and do gold. Let's say you wanted to have a gold one. And you wanted to do gold. It'll add 5 to the gold every time you respawn. See, look, now we have 5 gold. Now let me reset. Now I have 10 gold. See? And that will, every time a character is added, you will fire the event. That is what bindable events are basically do. You could do other things such as keeping track of player health. Every time a player is damaged, you can check on server whether or not it was a legitimate hit, like for an anti-cheat. You could also do this, add money, or whenever a player is killed, you can get the player on server with a bindable event. Like say, okay, Jimmy killed Tom, right? We're gonna go ahead and add 1 kill to Jimmy, right? So we can increase his kills. Like in this case, like I just did stat name, we could do kills, right? And we can do whatever we can do. If you wanted to, you could do the player name. So we're just gonna put Jimmy as the player name, right? So it'll do Jimmy, and we can do the name. I'm not. This is just an example. So we could do stat. Okay, well we're gonna need to get the player. That's stat name, right? So we have stats folder. We're gonna get the name of the player. Dot stat folder. So player name dot stats folder. The stat name. So in this case, it would be kills, and we're gonna add 1 if what's the name died, right? That's basically what remote bindable events do. They communicate from one side to the other side, client to client or server to server. You could also do the same thing on client to client, but it would not replicate to server because you'd have to use a remote event. Now, if you have any questions, message me on Discord. I also will be helping out by linking the documentation page for the stuff on Roblox Wiki. Sorry, and see you.